Hey YouTube, hi Spotify. It's Cal coming to you today with another video and we're going to piggyback from the video that we did the other day on sex and gender. And today we're going to talk a little bit about Carl Jung's theory, and when I say Jung, it's J-U-N-G, Carl Jung's theory on the Anima and the Animus, and how it is kind of an offshoot on the topic of sex and gender. So what you first want to know is Carl Jung defined the anima as the feminine unconscious side of men, and he described the animus as the unconscious masculine side of women. So, and one thing that you want to know is he basically, and when I portrayed this theory, I'm just basically doing it for, I don't totally agree with it, but I do agree with, it's an interesting philosophy. And I feel like, as with all psychological philosophies and theories, I feel like they're good to know, because sometimes you'll see that they're true, and then sometimes you'll be like, oh no, not so much. But I still like to share them because they're interesting. They're interesting ways to look at the world. And so for instance, what Carl Jung would have thought is the more unconscious you are of your side of your anima or your animus, the more it has the capacity to drive you. Because Carl Jung was a big believer in, if you're not conscious of it and you have not integrated your unconscious sides, that those sides or those things will drive you. So I'm going to give you an example of something so what he felt is that he felt, again, gender and gender traits, by the way, they do vary across cultures. So I'm not going to use specific traits when I talk about masculine and feminine today, because they do vary across cultures. And my cat is right here on my lap in case you end up seeing him. But so basically his idea was that if you have a just outwardly very, quote, masculine man, and say he is not in touch with his, quote, feminine side in himself, then he is going to be likely very, very drawn to a outwardly feminine woman to complement him. So in order to fulfill the needs of feeling balanced. And so what Carl Jung felt is that you can be outwardly masculine as long as you are inwardly in touch with whatever, emotionality you have. Because if not, what you're going to do is, again, feel compelled to find that in another person, not within yourself. And when you feel compelled to find these things within another person outside of you, Carl Jung felt it just means that you're not fully individuated yet. So in terms of whole within yourself. So Carl Jung felt, and what you will see a lot of times is, now if someone is outwardly masculine, so when I say androgynous, which is, in touch with both feminine and masculine tendencies, I don't necessarily mean outwardly looking androgynous, which is fine too. But a lot of times people think that's the only way you can be androgynous. And it's no, you could have a very outwardly masculine man, but if he is in touch with the feminine sides of himself, let's just say his emotionality, his vulnerability, his, communication or being of service to other people, whatever you want to define as feminine in our society, which, could get us into trouble. But if he's in touch with the feminine side of himself, then Carl Jung would have said, great, you're, more individuated, you are conscious whether you are outwardly masculine or not, right? But where people can get into trouble is if they are, say, outwardly masculine, but not in touch with those other things within themselves. So they end up needing to be drawn to someone who is the opposite. Baby. Okay. And so the whole point is, the more enlightened and integrated you are within yourself, the less you compulsively need someone else to feel balanced and, sorry, my cat's getting into a little trouble. But, to feel balanced. And Carl Jung's idea is that ideally you just want to have all those things inside yourself so that you can basically choose out of free will and not out of some compulsory need to be balanced by another person. Now, babes, okay. Say hi. Hi. So basically, again, you could hit this, someone who is not integrated, babes, you gotta go back. You can go back. Okay. Someone who is not integrated would look like, say, a very outwardly masculine man who is not in touch with the feminine sides of himself, and a very feminine woman who is not in touch with the masculine sides of herself. And again, I say this as someone who is very outwardly feminine. So, but I also would like to think that I am in touch with sometimes maybe too much, the inward masculine traits in myself. And again, everyone might think of those traits differently, but the whole point is, do you feel that you encompass and are in touch with the opposite gender traits within you, so that you don't need to go compulsively find it in another person? Now, some people think, the whole point of being like married or being, in a couple is that you have someone who balances you out in some ways. Those are the fans of opposites attract. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I do think that you can, there is a difference between actively choosing someone who is different than you out of consciousness, full consciousness, and compulsively choosing someone else because you feel you don't have those traits within you, and you, quote, need them to come from someone else. So Carl Jung would say, get more in touch with yourself, bring your shadow side and your, again, anima or animus more into the light of your own consciousness, so that you can benefit from the, quote, good traits of the other gender, and when he says, when we do this, we're more integrated, and then we can choose more freely who we want to be around, and we won't feel a, quote, need to be around people just because we haven't accessed those sides or those traits within ourselves. This can also look like, I don't know if you guys have often seen the good girl who goes for the, quote, bad boy. A lot of times that actually has to do more with shadow work. It's like the good girl is actually wanting to be her darker side is wanting to be expressed through the man that she's dating, because it becomes more acceptable for her to feel more in touch with her edginess or her rebelliousness or whatever it is. And it kind of it frees the good girl to be more in touch with that side of herself. That's exact. And so the more in touch with that side of herself, the darker side she is in herself, the less she might be drawn to, a bad boy who, I don't know, doesn't treat her well. I don't know. But the point is, and that's a little shadow work. That's not so much anima, animus, but it can be. And so again, this is just food for thought. I want to throw it out there. I feel like psychological theories, at the very least, are always just kind of fun ways to look at the world and see, oh yeah, do you see that? You can have conversations with people. Do you see that in other people, or do you not? And I don't personally believe one theory has a monopoly on the truth. I don't think, but I do think they all have kind of like tools that we can take from them, and we can say, oh yeah, that fits with my experience, and yet maybe that doesn't. And, so I'll just kind of like take these little gems of possible wisdom and store them away, and it's just fun to look at the world through different psychological lenses. So I hope that you learned something today. I remember when I learned this way back 20 plus years ago, I remember thinking, you know what, actually that is a good idea. Like that does fit with a lot of my experience. So I hope this finds you well, and I will see you next time.